The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the abandoned textile factory on Detroit's east side, each drop echoing through the hollow industrial cavern like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in late October, and the kind of cold that seeped into your bones had settled over the city like a shroud. Inside, 3 floors below street level, the basement had been transformed into something that resembled a surgical theater, if surgical theaters were designed by people who had long abandoned any pretense of humanity. Bright LED panels hung from reinforced ceiling mounts, casting harsh white light across stainless steel tables that gleamed with an almost obscene cleanliness. The air smelled of industrial disinfectant, that sharp chemical tang that burned the nostrils and made your eyes water. Dr. Marcus Hale stood at the scrub sink, methodically washing his hands with the same precision he'd learned 23 years ago at Johns Hopkins. He was 51 now, with silver threading through his dark hair, and lines etched deep around his eyes, lines that came from squinting into operating fields for decades, from sleepless nights, from choices that hollowed you out from the inside. He wore surgical scrubs that were pristine, pressed, the color of deep ocean water. His movements were practiced, economical, fingernails first, then between the fingers, working the antibacterial soap into a lather that ran pink down the drain. Outside, he could hear the muffled voices of the Russo family's men, their Italian-American accents thick as they moved their latest delivery into position. "Doctor's ready," called out Victor, one of the regular enforcers, a man built like a refrigerator with a face that looked like it had argued with several brick walls and lost. "We got the subject prepped." Hale didn't respond immediately. He finished his scrub protocol, exactly 2 minutes, no shortcuts, and dried his hands on a sterile towel. Through the rectangular window that separated the scrub room from the main surgical suite, he could see the table, and on it, strapped down with leather restraints at the wrists, ankles, and across the chest, was a man in his mid-30s. The man was conscious. They were always conscious. Hale pulled on his surgical gloves with practiced snaps, then pushed through the swing door into the suite. The temperature was kept at exactly 68 degrees, cool enough to prevent bacterial growth, warm enough that his hands wouldn't stiffen during the delicate work ahead. "Subject 87, announced Nadia from her position beside the instrument tray. She was 32, Croatian by birth, with dark hair pulled back so tight it made her cheekbones look even sharper. Her eyes were empty of everything except a bone-deep weariness that Hale recognized, because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. She'd been a surgical nurse at Detroit Memorial, before the Russos had found leverage. Her younger brother caught in a gambling debt that would have gotten him eliminated. Now she was here, complicit, trapped in the same web that had ensnared them all. "Vitals?" Hale asked, his voice clinical, detached. Heart rate elevated, 142. Blood pressure 160/95. Respiration rapid and shallow. Nadia's accent clipped the words. "He's aware of everything." The man on the table, Subject 87, though once he'd had a name, a life, people who would miss him, stared up at the lights with eyes wide with terror. A strip of medical tape covered his mouth, muffling the sounds that came from deep in his chest. Tears ran down his temples into his hair. Hale approached the table and looked down at his patient. That's how he still thought of them even now. Patients. It made it easier. "Your name is Michael Delgado," Hale said quietly, reviewing the file that Victor had provided. 34 years old, construction worker. You got behind on payments to the Russo family. $16,000 borrowed, $28,000 owed after interest. You tried to run. The man's eyes pleaded, his muffled screams intensifying. Your blood type is O negative, universal donor. You're healthy, no hepatitis, no HIV. Clean kidney function, good liver values. Hale set the file down. You're worth considerably more in parts than you ever were whole. It was a line he'd delivered 86 times before. The cruelty of it no longer registered. He turned to his instrument tray where Nadia had laid out the tools of his trade. Scalpels, several sizes, retractors, hemostats, suction equipment, an electrocautery device for controlling bleeding. Everything was sterile, professional, the setup indistinguishable from any legitimate operating room. Everything except the absence of an anesthesia machine. "The client wants the left kidney," came a voice from the observation window above. Angelo Russo, third-generation mob lieutenant, stood in the darkened gallery where witnesses, buyers, sometimes family members being taught a lesson about debts, could watch without contaminating the sterile field. "They're paying $400,000. Clean extraction, quick turnaround. They've got a recipient waiting in Dubai." Hale nodded once. $400,000. The Russos would take 70%. He'd clear $120,000 for 90 minutes of work. Blood money, devil's wages. The price of his soul, calculated and deposited into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. "Beginning procedure," Hale announced. Michael Delgado's screams, even muffled, filled the surgical suite as Hale made his first incision. The scalpel was sharp enough that it parted skin with almost no resistance, opening a line from the lower rib cage toward the hip. Blood welled immediately, and Nadia was there with suction, clearing the field. "Retractor," Hale said, his voice steady. The thing about operating without anesthesia, and Hale had done this 86 times so he knew, was that the body's response to trauma was predictable. The screaming would continue for the first few minutes, then give way to a kind of shock-induced dissociation as the brain tried to protect itself from the overwhelming sensory input. The patient would go pale, sometimes vomit if they hadn't been properly fasted, and their vitals would spike before eventually stabilizing at dangerously elevated levels. Some passed out. Most didn't. The human body's capacity to remain conscious through its own destruction was remarkable. Hale worked with the mechanical precision of someone who'd performed thousands of nephrectomies, cutting through the layers: skin, subcutaneous fat, muscle fascia, muscle itself. Every movement was exact, economical. He was still, in his own twisted way, an excellent surgeon. "Clamp," he said, and Nadia placed it in his palm. Through the observation window, Angelo Russo watched with the detached interest of a man observing a mechanic change oil. This was business. The Russo family had been running this operation for 3 years now, ever since they'd discovered that human organs were more profitable than drugs, with less law enforcement scrutiny and higher margins. They'd gone through 4 surgeons before Hale. The others had either cracked under the psychological weight or proven incompetent. Hale was different. Hale was reliable. Hale was already broken when they found him. "How much longer?" Angelo asked through the intercom. 40 minutes for extraction. Another 20 for stabilization and packaging," Hale replied without looking up. His hands moved inside Michael Delgado's body cavity, isolating the kidney, identifying the renal artery and vein. "The organ needs to be perfused immediately after extraction. The cooling solution is prepared?" "Ready," confirmed Nadia, gesturing to the specialized container that sat in an ice bath, a transportation device that would keep the kidney viable for up to 30 hours during transport to Dubai. Michael Delgado had stopped screaming. His eyes stared at the ceiling, glassy, seeing something beyond the LED panels and water-stained concrete. Shock was setting in. His body trembled despite the restraints. Hale had learned not to look at their faces. Early on in the first few procedures, he'd made that mistake, seen the humanity, the person, the life being dismantled on his table. It had nearly broken him. Now he looked only at the anatomy, the structures, the vessels, the organ itself. "Ligating the renal artery," he announced. The procedure continued with methodical precision. Tie off the blood vessels, separate the ureter, free the kidney from its surrounding tissue. Every step performed with the same care he'd once used to save lives rather than harvest them. In the corner of the suite, a laptop sat open on a stainless steel cart, its screen showing a live feed to the buyer in Dubai, a wealthy businessman whose own kidneys were failing, and who had neither the time nor the inclination to wait on a legitimate transplant list. The going rate for a healthy kidney on the black market was between $200,000 and $400,000, depending on quality and blood type compatibility. The market was global, insatiable, and growing. For every person waiting legally for a transplant, there were dozens willing to pay any price for immediate access. And for every desperate debtor, every person who disappeared into the machinery of organized crime, there was an opportunity. The first thing James Carver felt was cold. Not the gentle cool of autumn air, but the bone-deep, soul-crushing cold of metal against bare skin. His eyes cracked open to darkness punctuated by the orange glow of distant streetlights filtering through chain-link fence. Industrial district, somewhere east. The smell hit him next. Rotting garbage, rust, and something else. Something metallic and organic that his brain refused to identify. He tried to move and pain exploded through his entire left side, radiating from a point just below his ribcage with such intensity that his vision whited out. A sound escaped his throat, something between a gasp and a scream, and he tasted copper. Blood, his blood. Carver was 37, former Army medic who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before the IVA discharge for PTSD. He knew anatomy, he knew trauma, and he knew with the kind of certainty that came from field experience that something had been taken from him. His fingers, shaking, moved to his left flank. The surgical dressing was crude, basic gauze and medical tape, the kind you'd find in any first aid kit. Beneath it he could feel the ridge of sutures, professional sutures, clean, even stitches that spoke of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Memory came back in fragments, jagged pieces of a nightmare that was somehow real. The warehouse, the men in suits, Victor's refrigerator-sized frame blocking the exit, the table, the lights. The man in surgical scrubs with dead eyes who'd looked at him like he was a car being stripped for parts. And the pain. God, the pain. Carver had been awake for all of it. Every cut, every clamp, every moment of his body being violated in ways that made battlefield injuries seem merciful. He'd screamed until his vocal cords gave out, until there was nothing left but the raw animal sounds of a creature being unmade. Then nothing. Blackness. And now this. A dumpster in an industrial wasteland. At what his foggy brain calculated was maybe 4 or 5 in the morning based on the quality of darkness. They'd thrown him away. Assumed he was finished. Assumed wrong. Carver had survived worse. Kandahar, 2019. The IED that had taken 3 of his unit and left him with shrapnel scars across his back, and the kind of nightmares that no VA psychiatrist could medicate away. He'd survived the bottle after discharge, survived the divorce when Sarah couldn't handle the man who'd come back from the desert, survived the debt that had seemed like the only option when the medical bills piled up, and the disability checks weren't enough. $16,000 borrowed from the wrong people, the Russo family. Payment plans that turned into threats that turned into a black van outside his apartment last Tuesday. Now this. With movements that felt like pushing through concrete, Carver rolled onto his side. The world tilted and spun. Nausea rose in waves, but he couldn't afford to vomit, couldn't afford to waste any fluid when he could feel his body going into shock, could feel his blood pressure dropping like a stone. He'd been in shock before, recognized the signs, the cold sweat, the rapid heartbeat, the confusion at the edges of his consciousness. He had maybe an hour, maybe 2 if he was lucky, before his body started shutting down vital systems. Move. The word became a mantra. Move or die. Move or die. Carver dragged himself to the edge of the dumpster, every inch in agony that made him bite down on his lower lip until it bled. The drop to the ground was maybe 4 feet, might as well have been 40. He rolled over the edge and hit the asphalt with an impact that sent fresh lightning through his nervous system. Lay there, breathed, focused, combat first aid protocols running through his training-burned brain. Assess the injury, control the bleeding, get to safety, get to help. The street was empty, lined with abandoned warehouses and industrial facilities that Detroit's economic collapse had turned into urban fossils. No traffic, no people, just the distant sound of a freight train and the closer sound of rats moving through refuse. Carver's apartment was 8 miles away, might as well have been 800, but 3 blocks north. He remembered this area from before, from when he'd worked construction jobs around the city. There was a 24-hour gas station, and 2 blocks beyond that, Detroit Receiving Hospital. 3 blocks, then 2 more, 5 blocks total. He started crawling. The asphalt was cracked and potholed, each uneven surface another obstacle. His surgical wound screamed protest with every movement, and he could feel wetness spreading across the gauze, the sutures holding, but blood seeping through anyway. His bare feet scraped against concrete. They'd taken his shoes, his wallet, his phone, taken everything except his life, and that, only by accident. 20 yards felt like 20 miles. His arms shook with effort, his vision tunneled. Somewhere in the back of his mind, the medic training kicked in. You're losing too much blood, you're hypothermic, you need intervention now. But the rest of him, the stubborn part that had kept him alive in Kandahar, just kept moving. The gas station materialized like a mirage, fluorescent lights that hurt his eyes, a bored attendant visible through the window, scrolling through his phone behind bulletproof glass. Carver pulled himself to the door, managed to get his hand on the handle and collapsed against it. The attendant looked up, eyes widening, reached for the phone. Hospital, Carver managed through cracked lips. Detroit Receiving, 2 blocks. Call ambulance. Then the darkness took him again. Detective Sarah Chen stood in the emergency room corridor of Detroit Receiving Hospital, coffee in hand, her 4th cup since the shift started at 6 a.m., and studied the man in room 7, James Carver, according to the ID that had finally come back from his fingerprints in the system. Former military, VA records, some minor arrests for drunk and disorderly a few years back, nothing recent, and someone had performed surgery on him, professional surgery, then dumped him in the industrial district to die. Chen was 42, 15 years with Detroit PD, the last 7 in major crimes. She'd seen a lot in this city, the decay, the violence, the way organized crime had evolved from street-level drugs to more sophisticated operations. But this was new. This was something different. What do we know? She asked Dr. Patricia Morrison, the ER surgeon who'd stabilized Carver when he'd arrived 3 hours ago, more dead than alive. Morrison was in her 50s, gray-haired, with the permanent exhaustion that came from working Detroit's trauma center. Left kidney removed. Nephrectomy, performed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Clean incisions, proper technique, minimal collateral damage. If this had been done in a legitimate OR with proper anesthesia and post-op care, I'd call it textbook, but it wasn't, Chen said. No anesthesia based on the trauma indicators. The psychological shock alone. Morrison shook her head, and then they just sewed him up and threw him away. He's lucky to be alive. Another hour and he would have bled out or gone into organ failure. Chen made notes on her phone. How long until I can talk to him? He's sedated now. Probably another few hours, but Detective Morrison's expression was grave. This isn't the first case like this. Chen looked up sharply. Explain. 6 months ago we had a Jane Doe come in. Similar surgical wound. Kidney removed. Professional job. She didn't make it. Died of sepsis before we could stabilize her. We reported it to the police, but it got lost in the shuffle. And there have been others. Not here, but I've talked to colleagues at other hospitals. Henry Ford had a case. So did St. John's. Always the same pattern. Professional organ removal. Victims found in industrial areas or dumpsters. Most don't survive long enough to get help. The coffee turned to acid in Chen's stomach. How many cases? That I know of personally? 4. But Detective, if this is what I think it is, if there's an organized operation harvesting organs, there could be dozens more. Most would never make it to a hospital. They'd just disappear. Chen's mind was already running through databases. Cross-referencing. Missing persons. Unsolved deaths. The pattern had been there, hidden in plain sight among Detroit's usual violence. I need everything you have on those cases. Medical records, police reports, whatever you've got. I'll get them sent over, Morrison said. But be careful. If someone's running an operation like this, they have resources, money, protection. Chen nodded grimly. In Detroit, that meant organized crime. And organized crime meant the Russo family, who had their fingers in everything from construction contracts to city council members. She stepped into room 7. James Carver lay motionless under white sheets, IVs running into both arms, monitors beeping steadily. His face was pale, beard stubble darkening his jaw, and even unconscious he looked haunted. A survivor, the first one they knew of who'd lived long enough to potentially identify his attackers. Chen pulled a chair close to the bed and settled in to wait. Her phone buzzed. Text from her partner, Detective Marcus Williams. Found something. The clinic. She stepped into the hallway and called him back. What clinic? Been running backgrounds on missing persons from the past year, specifically people with medical debt or ties to loan sharks, Williams said. He was old school, close to retirement, with instincts sharpened by 30 years on the force. Found a pattern. At least 8 of them visited the same free medical clinic in the weeks before they disappeared. Place called Eastside Community Health Center. That's a legitimate clinic, Chen said. She knew it. Served the uninsured population, mostly funded by grants. On paper, yeah, but guess who sits on their board of directors? Vincent Russo. And guess who their biggest private donor is? Russo Family Charitable Foundation. Chen felt the pieces clicking into place. A free clinic where desperate people went for help. People with debt. People without insurance. People who wouldn't be missed quickly if they vanished. A perfect hunting ground. Get warrants, she said. Medical records, financial documents, everything, and Marcus, quietly. If the Russos are involved, they've got people everywhere. Already on it. Chen, be careful. She ended the call and looked back through the window at James Carver. He'd been taken, operated on, and thrown away, but he'd survived. And now he was the first real break they'd had. Somewhere in Detroit, in a basement operating room she couldn't yet find, someone was harvesting human organs. Professional, organized, profitable. And Chen was going to burn their operation to the ground. James Carver woke to the antiseptic smell of hospital and the steady rhythm of monitors tracking vitals he could barely feel. The morphine drip kept the worst of the pain at a manageable distance, but nothing could numb the violation he felt. The knowledge that someone had cut into him, taken part of him, and discarded what remained like trash. 3 days had passed since the gas station. 3 days of surgery to repair internal damage, blood transfusions, antibiotics to fight off infection. 3 days of detectives asking questions he could barely answer through the fog of trauma and medication. But today his mind was clearer, and today the rage had crystallized into something cold and focused. Detective Sarah Chen sat in the chair beside his bed, a notepad balanced on her knee. She was compact, intense, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Carver, I know this is difficult, but I need you to walk me through everything you remember. Every detail, no matter how small. Carver's voice was rough from intubation. The warehouse was on the east side, industrial area, near the old Packard plant, I think. They brought me in through a loading dock. How many men? 4 that I saw. Victor, big guy, maybe 6'4", 300 pounds, built like he lived in a gym, had an accent, Eastern European, Russian, maybe Ukrainian, Then there were two others, suits, Italian-looking. Russo family, based on what they were saying. Chen's pen moved rapidly. You heard names? Angelo. They called one of them Angelo. He was in charge, giving orders. Carver's hands clenched the sheets. And the surgeon. They called him doctor. That's it, just doctor. Can you describe him? 50, maybe 55, 6 feet tall, gray in his hair. Expensive watch, I noticed it when he was... Carver swallowed hard. When he was working. Rolex looked like. He was precise, professional, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Chen leaned forward. This is important, James. Did he say anything? Anything at all that might help us identify him? The memory came back sharp as broken glass. He told me my blood type, O negative, said I was worth more in parts than I was whole. He knew my name, my debt, everything about me. Carver's jaw tightened. He was calm, like it was just another Tuesday for him. It probably was, Chen said quietly. She pulled out her phone and showed him a series of photos. Do you recognize any of these men? Carver studied each image, stopped on the fourth. That's Victor, I'm sure of it. Victor Kozlov, enforcer for the Russo family. He's been on our radar for years, but we've never made anything stick. Chen made another note. James, you need to understand something. These people, they have resources, connections. They've been running this operation for years, and you're the first survivor who can identify them. Good, Carver said flatly. Then I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes to put them away. Chen's expression was troubled. It's not that simple. The Russos have lawyers, judges, half the city council in their pocket, and if they know you survived, if they know you can identify them, they'll come after me, I know. Carver met her eyes. Let them try. The door opened and another detective entered, older, African-American, with the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much. Chen, we got the warrant results back from Eastside Community Health. You need to see this. Chen excused herself and stepped into the hallway. Carver could hear their muffled conversation through the door. He stared at the ceiling tiles and counted them. 42. Counted the beeps of the heart monitor. 72 beats per minute. Counted the ways he was going to make them pay. The VA psychiatrist had told him, after Kandahar, that his PTSD manifested as hypervigilance and intrusive thoughts, that the rage he felt was a symptom of trauma, something to be managed with medication and therapy. But this wasn't PTSD. This was clarity. This was purpose. They'd taken his kidney. He was going to take everything from them. 40 blocks away, in a luxury penthouse overlooking the Detroit River, Dr. Marcus Hale stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the sunrise paint the water gold. He held a glass of scotch despite the early hour. These days, the drinking started earlier and earlier. His phone buzzed. Angelo Russo. Hale let it ring twice before answering. We have a problem, Angelo said without preamble. Subject 89. He survived. The scotch turned to ash in Hale's mouth. That's impossible. The blood loss alone. Impossible or not, he's alive. Detroit Receiving Hospital, and he's talking to the cops. Hale's mind raced through the procedure, looking for the error. He'd been meticulous as always. The incisions had been clean, the organ extraction perfect. Subject 89, James Carver, former military, had been a textbook case. Except textbook cases didn't crawl out of dumpsters and survive. How much does he know? Hale asked. Enough. He can identify Victor. Probably can identify you too if they show him photos. The detective working the case is Sarah Chen. Major crimes. She's smart and she doesn't take payoffs. Hale moved to his home office. A room lined with medical journals and framed credentials from another life. Johns Hopkins Medical School, chief resident cardiac surgery, letters of commendation, all of it meaningless now. Artifacts from a person he barely remembered being. What do you want me to do? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Clean it up, the way you should have the first time. Angelo, I'm a surgeon, not... You're whatever I need you to be. Angelo cut him off. You think those offshore accounts protect you? You think we don't have documentation of every procedure, every organ, every body? You're in this as deep as we are, doctor. Deeper. So you're going to fix this problem before it becomes our problem. The line went dead. Hale drained the scotch and poured another. His hands were shaking. When had they started shaking? Somewhere around subject 30 maybe, or 40. The exact number was lost in the blur of procedures that had become routine, mechanical, divorced from any remaining shred of conscience. He'd had reasons once, good reasons. His daughter Emma, 10 years old, born with congenital heart disease, on the transplant list for 3 years while her condition deteriorated, watching her fade while bureaucracy and waiting lists and insurance companies played their games. She died in his arms on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks before a donor heart became available. Too late. Always too late. The organ trafficking network had started as revenge, in a way. If the system couldn't save his daughter, he'd build a system that saved others, at any cost. But somewhere along the way, the mission had corrupted. The money had become its own justification. The Russos had become partners rather than means to an end. And now, 89 procedures later, he was exactly what they said he was. A monster. His office door opened. Nadia stood there, still in her coat, her face pale. "I heard about Carver. Marcus, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Angelo wants him eliminated. And you're going to do it just like that?" Her voice rose. "He's a victim. He survived. Maybe that means something. Maybe that means we stop." "We don't stop," Hale said wearily. "There is no stopping. There's only forward or prison. Those are the only two directions left." Nadia stepped into the office and closed the door. "My brother's debt was paid off 2 years ago. The Russos told me he was clear. I stayed because I was scared, because I didn't know how to get out. But I'm done, Marcus. I'm done being part of this." "Then you're dead," Hale said flatly. "The moment you walk away, you're a liability. They'll eliminate you. Probably your brother too, just to make a point. Then we go to the police, we testify, we end this." Hale laughed, a bitter sound. "And say what? That we harvested organs from 89 people? That we're accessories to organized crime? Nadia, we'd spend the rest of our lives in prison. Is that what you want? Better than this?" She met his eyes. "Better than whatever we've become." Before Hale could respond, his phone buzzed again. Text message from an unknown number. He opened it and felt his blood turn to ice. It was a photo. James Carver, in his hospital bed. The angle suggested it had been taken from just outside his room. The message below read, "Tonight, make it look like complications from surgery." Hale showed Nadia the phone. Her hand went to her mouth. "They're going to eliminate him whether we help or not," Hale said quietly. "The only question is whether we're complicit or whether we do something about it. What can we do?" Hale was silent for a long moment, staring at the photo. James Carver, former military medic, survivor against impossible odds, a man who'd been through hell and crawled back out, a man who deserved better than to be silenced in a hospital bed by mobsters protecting their interests. For the first time in years, Hale felt something stir in the hollow space where his conscience used to live. "I have an idea," he said, "but you're not going to like it." Detective Sarah Chen sat in her car outside Detroit Receiving Hospital, reviewing the documents Marcus Williams had sent over. The East Side Community Health Center's financial records told a story that was both clever and damning. The clinic was legitimate. That was the genius of it. Real doctors, real services funded by a combination of state grants and private donations. The Russo family's charitable foundation contributed $500,000 annually, enough to keep the lights on and maintain a respectable front. But buried in the patient records were anomalies. People who'd come in for routine care, blood pressure checks, diabetes management, free physicals, and then never showed up for follow-up appointments. Not unusual in a population without reliable transportation or stable housing. Except these patients had something in common. They all had debt to the Russo family, and they were all healthy, blood-typed, and tissue-matched before they vanished. Chen's phone rang. Hospital security. "Detective, we have a situation. There's a man trying to access the floor where your witness is being held. Says he's a doctor, but his credentials aren't checking out." Chen was already moving, badge in hand. "Lock down that floor. Nobody in or out until I get there." She took the stairs 2 at a time, her service weapon a reassuring weight at her hip. 4th floor, room 7. 2 security guards stood outside Carver's door, and between them, hands raised, was a man in a white coat. Not just any man. The man from the parking garage security footage Chen had pulled from the clinic. Dr. Marcus Hale. "Step away from the door," Chen commanded. Weapon drawn. "Hands where I can see them." Hale complied slowly. "Detective Chen, I presume. I came to turn myself in. That's convenient considering we just issued a warrant for your arrest." "I know. I've been monitoring police channels. You're looking for the surgeon who's been harvesting organs for the Russo family. That's me. I'm prepared to testify, to provide evidence, to give you everything you need to dismantle their entire operation." Hale's voice was steady despite the gun pointed at him. "But first, you need to move James Carver. Now. They're coming for him tonight." Min Chen didn't lower her weapon. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I sent you this." Hale carefully reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. Everything. Names, dates, locations, client lists, financial records, 89 procedures over 3 years. "I documented all of it, insurance in case the Russos ever turned on me. Now I'm using it to end this." "Why now?" Chen demanded. "Why after 89 people?" Hale's face was gray. "Because number 89 survived. And because I'm tired of being a monster." The sound of footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Multiple people moving fast. Chen made a split-second decision. "Security. Move Carver to the ICU through the service elevator. Now." She grabbed Hale's arm. "You're coming with me. If you're lying, you'll wish the Russos had found you first." They moved quickly, Chen keeping Hale ahead of her. Behind them, she heard the stairwell door burst open, heard shouting. Victor Kozlov and 2 other men, armed, scanning the hallway. Chen pulled Hale into an empty patient room and keyed her radio. Officer needs assistance, 4th floor, Detroit receiving. Armed suspects in hospital. Shots may be fired. Through the door's window, she saw Victor and his men kicking open doors, searching, saw patients screaming, saw nurses scrambling for cover. Is what you said true? Chen asked Hale quietly. Can you give me everything? Everything, Hale confirmed. The Russos, their clients, the network. I can end it all. Then stay behind me and pray backup gets here before they do. Chen stepped into the hallway, weapon raised. Detroit police, drop your weapons. Victor turned, his gun rising. For one frozen moment, everything hung in balance. Then he smiled, cold and cruel. Detective, wrong place, wrong time. Final warning, Chen said. Drop the weapon. The first shot shattered the fluorescent lights above them. The second embedded in the wall 6 inches from Chen's head, and then the hospital erupted into chaos. The gunfire in Detroit Receiving Hospital lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, long enough for 3 uniformed officers to arrive, for Victor Kozlov to take a round in the shoulder, and for his 2 associates to realize that attempting violence in a building full of witnesses was a suicide mission. They fled through the emergency exit, leaving Victor bleeding on the linoleum, cursing in Russian while Detective Chen cuffed him to a gurney. But the real battle was just beginning. In the hospital's security office, Chen reviewed the USB drive that Dr. Marcus Hale had provided. The contents were damning. Spreadsheets detailing 89 procedures over 3 years, names of victims cross-referenced with Russo family debt collections, international wire transfers totaling over $30 million, and most critically, a client list that read like a who's who of wealthy individuals from 17 countries. This is enough to bring down the entire network, Marcus Williams said, scrolling through the files. Russo family, their associates, the buyers. We're talking RICO charges, conspiracy, organized crime. Federal prosecutors are going to have a field day. Chen looked through the observation window at Hale, who sat in an interview room with the defeated posture of a man who'd finally stopped running from himself. He's cooperating fully. Says he wants to make a statement on record confessing to everything. Question is, can we keep him alive long enough to testify? Williams asked grimly. The Russos have long reach. Once word gets out that their operation is compromised, then we move fast. Chen interrupted. We hit them tonight. Every location, every associate, coordinated arrests. We don't give them time to destroy evidence or eliminate witnesses. Williams nodded slowly. I'll coordinate with the FBI and the Organized Crime Task Force. But Chen, Carver, the kid's talking about going after them himself. Says he knows where the main facility is, that he can identify it from the outside. Chen's jaw tightened. James Carver had been moved to a secure wing, but he'd been asking questions, demanding to be released, making it clear that his cooperation came with conditions. He wanted justice, but more than that, he wanted revenge. Keep him contained, Chen said. Last thing we need is a civilian playing vigilante. But even as she said it, she knew the words were hollow. Carver was former military, trained in combat, and motivated by the kind of trauma that made men dangerous. If he decided to take matters into his own hands, hospital security wouldn't stop him. 3 floors above, James Carver sat on the edge of his hospital bed, testing his weight on legs that still felt unsteady. The surgical wound in his side pulled with each movement, a constant reminder of what had been taken. But pain was manageable. Pain was familiar. He'd operated through worse in field hospitals in Kandahar, had stitched up fellow soldiers while mortars fell around them. The morphine drip had been disconnected at his insistence. He needed clarity, needed the sharp edge that pain provided. The hospital had provided him with clothes, generic scrubs and slip-on shoes, but no personal effects, no phone, no wallet. They said it was for his protection. Carver knew protection was an illusion. The Russos had already proven they could reach him here. The shooting in the hallway had made that clear. The only real protection was ending the threat permanently. The door opened and a nurse entered, young, nervous, carrying medication in a small cup. Mr. Carver, I have your antibiotics. He took them, swallowed them dry. The detective, Chen, when is she coming back? I don't know, sir. She's coordinating with other agencies. Something about raids tonight. The nurse checked his vitals, making notes on a tablet. Your blood pressure is elevated. You should rest. Rest. As if rest were possible when every time he closed his eyes he was back on that table, feeling the scalpel, hearing his own screams. As if rest would make whole what had been taken. After the nurse left, Carver moved to the window, 4th floor, facing east. From here he could see the industrial district where he'd been dumped, could trace the geography in his mind. The warehouse had been near the old Packard plant, he was certain. He remembered the distinctive silhouette of the abandoned automotive factory against the night sky when Victor had dragged him from the van. 3 years in that facility, according to the detective. 89 people, 89 lives destroyed or ended for profit. And somewhere in that building there would be evidence, records, maybe even remains. Carver's reflection in the window showed a man he barely recognized. Hollow-eyed, gaunt, marked by trauma that would never fully heal. But beneath the damage something harder had formed. Purpose, direction. The Russos had made a mistake. They'd left him alive, and now they were going to learn what happened when you tried to break a soldier and failed. By nightfall, the coordinated operation was in motion. FBI agents, Detroit Police, Michigan State Police, over 60 officers converging on 5 locations simultaneously. The East Side Community Health Center, 3 Russo family properties, and the warehouse near the Packard plant that Carver had identified from architectural databases and satellite imagery. Detective Chen wore a tactical vest with "Police" stenciled across the back, her service weapon holstered, as she stood in the command vehicle outside the warehouse. Radio chatter filled the air as teams reported in position. Alpha Team, North Entrance secured. Bravo Team, East Side ready. Charlie Team, we have eyes on the loading dock. No visible activity. Chen keyed her radio. All teams, this is command. We have a warrant for the premises and all individuals inside. Rules of engagement. Suspects are considered armed and dangerous. Lethal force is authorized if threatened. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. The teams moved in synchronized precision, breaching doors, flooding the warehouse with tactical lights and commands to freeze. Chen followed Alpha Team through the north entrance, weapon drawn, moving through the abandoned factory floor toward the basement access that blueprints had revealed. The door to the basement was reinforced steel, locked from the inside. The breaching team used a hydraulic ram, and the door buckled inward with a shriek of metal. Chen descended the stairs into sterile white light. The surgical suite was exactly as Hale had described. LED panels hanging from the ceiling, stainless steel tables, instrument trays, monitoring equipment. Everything professional, clean, horrifyingly efficient, and empty. Clear, called the team leader. No subjects present, but the evidence was everywhere. Chen moved through the space, documenting with her phone's camera. Bloodstains on the floor that someone had tried to clean. A refrigeration unit containing medical supplies. And in a locked office, filing cabinets full of records that corroborated everything on Hale's USB drive. Detective, called one of the FBI agents. You need to see this. In the back corner of the basement, behind a false wall, they'd found another room. Smaller, colder, filled with medical waste containers and, more disturbingly, personal effects. Wallets, identification cards, watches, wedding rings. The belongings of people who'd never left this place. Chen felt her stomach turn. 89 procedures. Not all of them had survived. Some had been disposed of entirely, their bodies likely dissolved in industrial acid or buried in unmarked locations throughout the city. The full scope of the horror was still unfolding. Get forensics down here, she ordered. I want every surface processed, every piece of evidence cataloged. And find me Angelo Russo. He's not at any of his known addresses, which means he's running. But even as Chen coordinated the investigation, a nagging worry gnawed at her. James Carver. She pulled out her phone and called the hospital security desk. This is Detective Chen. I need a status check on James Carver, 4th floor secure wing. There was a pause. Then, Detective, we have a problem. Carver's gone. Left approximately 30 minutes ago. He overpowered a security guard, took his jacket and ID badge. We have him on camera leaving through the service exit. Chen closed her eyes. Send me the footage. And put out an APB. Consider him armed and potentially heading toward Russo family locations. Williams appeared at her elbow. Carver's loose and looking for revenge. We need to find him before he does something that gets him taken out, or before he compromises our case by contaminating evidence. Where would he go? Chen thought about the psychological profile, the military background, the trauma. Carver wasn't thinking rationally. He was thinking tactically. Where would a soldier with nothing left to lose go? Hale, she said suddenly. Carver wants the surgeon. He wants the man who cut into him. Where are we keeping Hale? Federal building downtown. Witness protection until the trial. Heavy security. Not heavy enough if Carver's determined. Chen was already moving toward the exit. Call ahead. Tell them we have a potential breach situation. The federal building's underground parking garage was nearly empty at 9 p.m. Just a few government vehicles, and the armored transport that had brought Dr. Marcus Hale from the hospital to protective custody. 2 U.S. Marshals stood guard outside the detention area. Professionals who'd done this 1,000 times. They never saw James Carver coming. He'd spent the last hour observing, planning, using skills honed in hostile territory where one mistake meant death. The security guard's jacket and badge had gotten him into the building. The service corridors had gotten him past the main checkpoints, and the element of surprise got him past the marshals. Carver didn't hurt them, didn't need to. A quick disarm, pressure points that induced unconsciousness, and he had their access cards. 30 seconds later, he was through the security door and face to face with the man who'd haunted his nightmares. Dr. Marcus Hale sat in a holding cell reading a medical journal. He looked up as the door opened, and for a moment their eyes met. Recognition flared. "James Carver," Hale said quietly, setting the journal aside. "I wondered if you'd come." "You wondered?" Carver's voice was raw. "You cut into me. You took my kidney while I was awake, while I screamed, while I begged. And you wondered if I'd come?" "I knew you would," Hale corrected. He stood slowly, hands visible, non-threatening, "because I would have done the same. In your position, I would have wanted answers, maybe revenge, maybe both." Carver stepped into the cell, and the door closed behind him with a magnetic click. The security cameras were recording everything. Somewhere, alarms were probably sounding, but right now, in this moment, it was just the two of them. "Tell me why," Carver demanded. "You were a real doctor once. Johns Hopkins, cardiac surgery, all those degrees on your wall. What happened to you?" Hale was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "My daughter died waiting for a heart transplant. Emma. She was 10 years old, 3 years on the waiting list while bureaucracy and insurance companies played their games. By the time a donor heart became available, it was 3 weeks too late. So you decided to become a monster to save others?" Carver's laugh was bitter. "That's your justification?" "No, there is no justification." Hale met his eyes. "It started with good intentions and ended with 89 people violated or terminated for profit. Somewhere along the way, I lost myself. The mission corrupted. The money became its own reason. And I became exactly what you see, a monster who deserves whatever judgment comes. You don't get to be sorry," Carver said, his hands clenching. "You don't get redemption. You get to live with what you did, every day, every victim, every scream. I know, I will." Hale's voice cracked. "James, I can't undo what I did to you, but I can make sure no one else suffers. I've given the police everything, names, locations, evidence. The Russo network is finished. The clients are being arrested. It's over. It's not over for me." Carver's shout echoed in the small cell. "I wake up and part of me is gone. I look at the scar and remember every second of that table. You think your testimony makes us even? You think your cooperation erases what you did?" "No," Hale said simply. "Nothing erases it, but it's all I have left to give." The door burst open. Detective Chen stood there, weapon drawn, flanked by 3 U.S. Marshals. "Carver, step away from the prisoner now." Carver didn't move. He stood close enough to Hale that he could see the shadows under the surgeon's eyes, the tremor in his hands, the weight of guilt that had carved new lines into his face. "He's not worth it," Chen said quietly. "Killing him won't give you back what you lost, won't heal the trauma, won't make you whole." "I know," Carver said. He turned to look at Chen. "I'm not here to end him. I'm here to see him, to look into the eyes of the man who tried to reduce me to parts and profit, and remind him that I'm still human, still standing, still here." He stepped back from Hale, hands raised. "I survived. That's my revenge. Every day I breathe is proof that he failed." Chen lowered her weapon slowly. "Come on, James, let's get you out of here." As the marshals escorted Carver away, Hale sank onto the bench in his cell, his head in his hands. For the first time in 3 years, he wept for his daughter, for his victims, for the man he'd been and the monster he'd become. 3 months later, the trial of Angelo Russo and 17 associates began in federal court. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, financial records, victim testimonies, medical documentation, and the cooperation of Dr. Marcus Hale, who spent 6 days on the witness stand detailing every procedure, every client, every crime. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Angelo Russo received life without parole. His associates received sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years. The international organ trafficking network collapsed as arrests were made in Dubai, London, Singapore, and Moscow. Dr. Marcus Hale, in exchange for his testimony, received 25 years with possibility of parole after 15. He would spend the rest of his productive life in federal prison, where he'd volunteered to provide medical services to inmates, a small penance for crimes that could never be fully repaid. Detective Sarah Chen received a commendation for her work dismantling the network. She stood in the courthouse steps as the verdicts were read, thinking about the 89 victims, the families who finally had closure, and the systemic failures that had allowed such horror to flourish. And James Carver sat in the courtroom gallery, watching as justice was served. The scar on his side would never fully fade. The nightmares still came on bad nights. The sense of violation lingered like a shadow, but he'd survived. He'd faced his attacker. He'd seen the network destroyed and the guilty punished. It wasn't healing, not completely. Trauma didn't work that way, but it was closure. It was justice, and sometimes that was enough. As he left the courthouse, Carver paused on the steps looking out at Detroit, a city of decay and resilience, of violence and survival. He'd been broken here, but he'd also found a strength he didn't know he possessed. The autumn wind carried the smell of rain. Somewhere in the city, life continued. People struggled and survived, fell and rose again. The human capacity for both cruelty and endurance was limitless. James Carver adjusted his jacket and walked down the steps, disappearing into the crowd. Another survivor, another story, another reminder that even in the darkest places, even when reduced to our most vulnerable, we remain human, we remain.